Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this is October's uh, free Moti-Vitality member monthly webinar, uh, although it's actually November that we're doing it right now because we had a schedule conflict. So this is beginning of November, which is really scary in of itself. This is I'd like to welcome everybody. This is a webinar specifically for those of you that are members of Moti-Vitality.com, and today we're going to be talking about scary sales appointments. And basically today is an expansion. So a couple months ago we did a two-part series, the Sales Essentials, and at the end of Sales Essentials, we spent about 5 minutes talking about all the stuff that we're going to spend close to an hour talking about today. Okay, one-leggers and what I call short timers and arguing spouses and screaming kids. And I want to expand on those things a little bit because blowing through them in 5 or 10 minutes, it just doesn't quite cover them, and you can't really quite have the discussion that you need to have with them. So that's what we're talking about today. And I was trying to think of a Halloweenish themed topic, and by gum, all right, I don't know what that was, but anyway, I have everybody muted just so we don't get the background noise. And so if you need to communicate, then just shoot a chat in the chat window over on the right-hand side, or you can right-click on your name on the participants section there and unmute yourself. I don't mind the discussion or the questions or the thoughts or comments. But I do have everybody muted so we don't get the background noise there. Okay, so let's get started. First, I want to say thank you to everybody. I really do very much appreciate the opportunity to serve you guys this way. It's always, I always get a little nervous when I send one of these things out. Have anybody there? Is anybody going to participate? Is anybody going to, enjoy the topics? I really do appreciate it. I appreciate being able to bring everybody together. I appreciate that you guys find enough value in the topics and in the presentation to log on there and check it out. It's always my goal to make sure that the information I give to you is at least as valuable as the time that you're giving to me. So thank you very much. Okay. So we're going to start off with those of you that have watched the Moti-Vitality webinars or have ever heard me speak or present before. You know that my philosophy in sales is really very simple. It's really quite simply give more than you take. I think that it is a good philosophy when you're, anytime you're talking about sales, a lot of times everybody talks about how I'm going to make so much commission, and there's always the closing techniques, and there's always these things that you're supposed to do to I don't know. It's sometimes sales, when you read the sales books, it's almost like people are, it's like ways to trick customers into buying certain things, and there is a strategy to it. I mean, there's no doubt that sales, there is a strategy there, but I think if you approach sales, and not only sales, but the way you're working with people, both professionally and personally, if you approach it with a give more than you take attitude, when you go into the house and you say, and you're presenting to a customer, are you offering more than what you're asking for? And it's kind of the same philosophy, the same premise that I want to start talking about these scary appointments with, because ultimately we are in sales. We're not professional visitors. We're not, many of us are commission or straight commission professionals, which means that we have to have an income. But I believe that if first and foremost, if you give more than you take, if you have that philosophy, then the income will come. Whether it's on that specific sales call or not, the income will come. Not to mention the fact that you really get to sleep well at night. You feel good about what you're doing. And as we approach these scary appointments, what we're going to talk about today, I think put the fact that you're a salesperson or a sales professional on the back burner, and remember first and foremost that you're a person who is there to help people, and the things that you'll do, the ways you'll handle these appointments or these challenges that we all run into will just be common sense. It's not like there's anything special about it other than it's you just being nice. Okay. All right. So we're going to start right off with what is known as the one-leggers. And you know, it's funny. You talk to other people who have never been in sales, and um, I need, we're going to talk about one-leggers, or how do you handle one-leggers? One-leggers are, it's a term that we know about here in sales. I'm looking at all my clip art here and realizing that that's going to be a little distracting. Not too horrible. There's a little creepy skeletons crawling all over the screen. I thought they were fun to create, but whatever. But a one-legger basically, for those of you who may be new to sales, is a term that means that you only have one decision maker there, right? So you have the husband and a wife, and Jen, when she does her What Women Want presentation, she often talks about how she bought windows, and she had one particular window company that wouldn't even come to the house unless her husband was there. Jen's not even married. So, and that's pretty common. It is true, so let me set the stage on this. It is true that when you are presenting to one decision maker, to either just the husband or just the wife, that the odds of it closing that night are less. It's less likely to close. Percentage of the ones they're going to be down. And so, yes, it does make sense to try and get all decision makers in the home or at the appointment. But I can tell you that this is my opinion. I think this has really changed, especially with the independence of people and how busy people are. You know, people are working more than one job. They've got things going on. Odds are pretty good that they have already discussed it. If you have a wife there, by the way, at the house, maybe, for example, at the house, and she's the one there, you set the appointment with just the wife, it's very possible that she has already discussed this, that they already have a budget in mind. But I'm going to give you some tips. I mean, it is better to get both homeowners there, no question about it, but I wouldn't just assume, like a lot of companies do, or a lot of people that have been in sales for a long time, I wouldn't just assume that because there's only the wife there or only the husband there that it's not going to close. That I wouldn't assume that you're going to automatically hear, well, let me talk about it with my husband, or let me talk about it with my wife. That does happen, but I don't think it happens as often as it once did. So ways to handle one-leggers. Jen, you're more than welcome to pop in here and say anything about these that you want, okay? But let me talk to you. Let me give you some thoughts on one-leggers here. First off, with social media, I was looking up and doing recent research to see if I could find any new statistics. You have something you want to add, Jen? Is that you, Jen? Oh, I thought somebody came on, so okay.
Am I muted?
Nope, but I'm about to. Now you are. So, no, you're not. Now you are. Okay. All right. So with social media nowadays, you know, if you do, I did a quick little Google search because I was looking for some. You know, Jen has some statistics on her What Women Want, and I was looking for some new and updated, most recent statistics. And there were a lot of articles that I read on these whole one-legger things as I was putting together this PowerPoint. And the one thing that was kind of prevalent that kept coming out over and over and over again is the downside of social media when it comes to how offensive people can be, or how offended people are when a company calls in and asks about you know, whether or not the husband's going to be there or whether or not the wife is going to be. It's almost always the women that seem to go on social media and are really upset that a company won't come out. You know, um, that so you call up, somebody calls in to set an appointment, and you say, "Well, is your husband going to be there?" Well, the reality is, a lot of times people may not be married. Um, Maybe they, in today's age, I mean, there's no, don't, you can't really be surprised if it's Lisa and Wendy and not, um, Lisa and Michael. So that's that. I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of circumstances where they may not be there, but it seems like that question is very insulting. Is your husband going to be home, or you have to really be careful how you word that question. And I think that sometimes I found just saying it straight out, just being very blunt about it, is to tell them what you want or what you need. And so the way I like to word it, I'll say, does it make sense for all the homeowners, or I'll ask, is there anybody else involved in making decisions? Or anybody else that would be that would have that would be affected by the decision, by the research? Anybody else that might be interested in learning about how these things work and what the differences are? And if you ask it that way, and so sometimes when in the course of the conversation you can say, well, yeah, it's you can say, how many people in the home? And a lot of times they'll volunteer that information. Well, it's my husband and 3 kids and I. Well, then I would follow up with the question, does it make sense to have both you and your husband at the home? And I like to ask, not to demand, but I like to say, does it make sense to have both of you there? The reason I ask that is because if you're anything like a lot of people, you're going to have questions that he's not going to have, and he's going to have questions you're not going to have, and then together you guys are going to have questions that, and it's easier sometimes to consolidate those questions and do the research together. When you ask it like that, I think it shows respect for her as well as him. But you're asking the question, does it make sense to have both of us come out, or to have both of you there? If she says, no, I don't think that's going to work with, I don't think we need to do that. Well, you really at that point have 2 options. You can either basically call her a liar by saying, well, I'm not going to come out and present to you unless both of you are there, or you can say, okay, here's an opportunity to serve somebody to answer the questions, and is it possible at that point that she's going to have you come out to the house and explain everything and say, well, let me talk to my husband? Yeah, of course that's possible. But I think it's better to get in front of that customer and have an opportunity than to lose the opportunity entirely and to have them go on Facebook because you wouldn't come out because her husband wasn't there. So another way I heard about, somebody suggested, are you the sole homeowner? Is a good way of asking it. Are you the only homeowner involved with making the decision? You can ask that. It's a nice generic way of asking it, and to where hopefully it's not as offensive. Don't be afraid. Salespeople complain a lot about one-leggers, especially when the office is setting appointments. Because a lot of times it's hard to get people in the office to ask it. Are you the sole homeowner, or does it make sense to have both of you there? It's hard to get people. This is why I love creative leads, by the way, because if I create the leads and I set the appointments, I run into, when I was in sales, I ran into this way, way, way less than what a lot of people would run into, because they were creative, because I already knew the people. I knew whether they were married or not long before I set the appointment. So, but if you're not willing to work on evenings or weekends, you're going to get a lot of one-leggers, okay? Saturdays, if you're not willing to run an appointment on a Saturday, then you're going to run into a lot of one-leggers. But I think a lot of times when people set the appointments, when they think that people are only going to work 9 to 5 or during the day, like they have to set an appointment during the day. Just like service, they don't even think about calling and having, and this is a service type industry. So a lot of times I think people they're not aware that you would be willing to come out at 6 o'clock in the evening, or Saturday morning, or whatever. So I think when you go to set the appointment, make sure that they understand that you have availability. So you can ask that. I can say, does it make sense to have both of you there, you and your wife there? If you're anything like a lot of people, she's going to have a lot of questions you don't have, or you're going to have a lot of questions she doesn't have, and I understand that. Sometimes that means I might have to swing out there in the evening or on a Saturday if that would work for you. But I want to make sure that I answer both of your questions, and I'm able to explain it to both of you. So, and they go, oh, you don't mind coming out in the evening? No. Would you prefer to do it before or after dinner? Would you? What time are you guys usually available? And so you can then begin to ask the question there and schedule it around their convenience. But if you're not willing to work evenings or weekends, you're going to have a lot of one-leggers. Sometimes, and I have done this a few times, this is a common suggestion that you will find on handling the one-leggers. It doesn't always work, and it is inconvenient, but you are a sales professional, and if you want the sale, then you got to go the extra mile. You got to serve your customers. Okay, so sometimes you can do two-part appointments. Like you get there and somebody is late, or they're not home, or they thought they were going to be there but they had to run an errand, or whatever. So you can go in, and I'll tell you if it's okay, what we can do is, while I'm here, I can go in and test the water and do a plumbing assessment and get all that out of the way, and then I can swing back when both of you are here if you want, and give you the options and kind of explain them to you how they work. That should only take 20-25 minutes at that point, because we have done the hard part. And sometimes people will say, no, why don't you just give me the prices, it'll be fine. Okay, but sometimes they want that other person there, and it's awkward for them to ask if you could come back and reschedule. They get the appointment, that it's set. So if you offer, I think you'll be surprised at how often somebody will take you up on that offer to come back and explain it. This is a decision. A lot of times, a water treatment system can get up, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. That's a big deal for somebody to make unilaterally in a home for a lot of people. So they want to be able to share that information and get that information with their partner, with the other person there. And so I think a lot of times we have one-leggers because we're simply not offering to come back and do it for both of them. All right, so that's my thoughts on the one-leggers there. So let's move on to screaming versus obnoxious kids, because there are differences here. Okay, this is a reality of what we do. Sometimes we walk into an appointment and it's, I don't know how many of you are parents that are on this call, but I can tell you that my kids were actually pretty well behaved. They're good kids. I like them, which is a plus. I like my kids most of the time, but it was always at the most inopportune times that they decided they were going to have a bad day. We'd have company come over. We had if we had somebody come to the house on a sales call, the kids just, it's like that's the one time they chose to act up, or I mean, I get it. It's unusual for them. It's different. But that's the first thing that I want to suggest to you is when you walk into a house, somebody is embarrassed, because their kids are throwing a fit or a tantrum, or they're screaming, or maybe it's not even the kid's fault. Maybe the kids are sick, maybe they've got a fever, or maybe, for whatever reason. But the question I would ask first and foremost, how would you feel? How would it make you feel if you had a total stranger coming to your home and your kids were just, they were having a moment, having one of those evenings? How would it make you feel? You'd probably be a little embarrassed about it. And, so I think very first and foremost, the very first thing you need to do is be empathetic and offer to reschedule. This has happened. I'm a dad too. I've been through this. I totally get it. And I want to make sure that I can answer your questions and serve you guys. Would it make sense for me to come back in an hour or even in the next day or two? you know, don't be afraid to reschedule that. I mean, I think your customers, for the most part, are really going to appreciate that, especially if they're really interested, if they have a real desire or a need. I think that you're going to set yourself apart from your competitors for sure because you show that you are actually a human being, not just out to get the commission, to get that quick money. You know, even scheduling. You know, do you want me to come back in a half hour? Uh, I think that you'll find. Yeah, do you mind? Jen and I remember it wasn't screaming kids, but it was a similar situation where they had kids and they were running late. I mean, it was just that they were just running late. But Jen and I, when she was in sales way back years and years and years and years, and I was training her when we worked at the company where we met, um, we knocked on the door and they were just having dinner. They were getting ready. They had because they were running so late and they were scrambling trying to get things done. Um, they had ordered Chinese actually, and they were just spreading it out on the table. And that was one of the things I asked them. Do you guys want to eat in peace? And I mean, we can kill time for an hour and come back in an hour. And they were so appreciative. I mean, it was almost just like this look of relief on their faces that we were willing to do that. And we ended up selling a reverse osmosis system to them that night. And um, it was, I always think about that, just how we could have gone in there and done the appointment, but we wouldn't have ever had their attention because the kids hadn't eaten, they hadn't eaten, we would have been very rushed. It just wouldn't have worked. So reschedule it if necessary. Now, there are obnoxious kids, and there are those kids that are just rude and nasty and obnoxious. So there are certain things you can do. Sometimes the kids are, you know, they want their parents' attention. Maybe the parents have been working a lot. So don't just assume that they're like jerk kids. Okay, you can try a couple things. I always carry a little pocket magic with me, or I don't always, but I like to. When I was in sales, I did. I carry a little pocket magic, and you do a few little magic tricks for the kids or whatever. But even if you don't have that, I'd say get them involved with the presentation. You know, can you count with me? Count the hardness drops. Okay, so what color is that? Do you see that? You know, get them involved. Let them shake the soap glass. Let them count your drops. Um, they're fascinated by this chemistry set that you have. Okay, and they so are the adults, but the kids are as well. You know, get them involved. I mean, even if they're now sometimes they're like 2 or 3 year old little kids, you know, and I say that I sounded like I said that with total disdain, like ew, yuck, like little ones. I always say bring them back when they can talk. That's a, um, but no, I mean if you can get them involved somehow, you know, I think sometimes we have, I have, and sometimes put a game on my iPad or whatever, and let the kid play on my iPad. Of course, most kids nowadays have some tablet somewhere, or some iPad somewhere that they can play on themselves. But get them involved. Um, Sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. Okay, I mean you're not allowed to kick them or injure them in any way. But what I think is if you have like hidden, if you carry like a monster or depending on what your ethics are, you know, you could give them like a juice cup full of Monster or 5 hour energy or something right before you leave, and or if you really a little Benadryl works. Um, I should say that this suggestion is not one that is necessarily sanctioned by Moti-Vitality. Certainly not all of Moti-Vitality, but it is a suggestion that you will only find. I bet nobody else ever, any sales trainer ever in our industry or anywhere else will ever suggest giving a Monster drink or Benadryl to an obnoxious child, but you found it here. Okay. So anyway, moving on. Distracted spouse. This happens a lot. Okay. With where and it's not only I think a lot of times when we say distracted spouse, it's a lot of times it's the we assume it's like the mom that's not there, but a lot of times I've gone on appointments where it's the mom that was kind of interested in things, and the guy's working in the garage, or he's cutting the grass, or it's the last nice day. it's a similar thing. It sometimes. I mean, I will admit, like yesterday here, it was November here in Michigan. It's I think November pretty much everywhere in the country, but I wasn't anywhere else in the country. Uh, so all I can really vouch for is that it was November here, this this part of the state. But it was gorgeous, is what I was saying. And typically this time of year, it's hit or miss. But it was sunny and gorgeous and 70 degrees, and there was a little yard work that needed to be done yesterday evening and afternoon, and I went out and I did it. And I'll tell you what, if I'd have had an appointment with somebody, especially one that was going to take a couple hours, it would have been it would have been tough. It would have been very frustrating for me because there are not going to be a lot of days left like there was. In fact, just today it's rainy and stormy here all day, and so and now it's going to start to get cold and the snow's going to come. And so I would have been looking at, as a homeowner, looking at yesterday, going, man, I really need to cut the grass one more time. I need to get out. This is, I saw people already putting Christmas lights up in the neighborhood yesterday because they know that it's one of the last days they will be able to do that, where it's warm and not rainy and nasty and cold to go out and do it. So, so don't be afraid to reschedule those things. This is what I mean. Give more than you take. If you walk into this appointment with the not forgetting that you're actually a person, human being, understanding that they are actually people and that they have lives that are that revolve around other things other than buying water treatment. I mean, you also will kind of get an idea of their, if you make that offer, you'll kind of get an idea of their commitment, of how serious they are, because sometimes they'll say, no, you know what, a lot of times they'll say, well, how long is this going to take? If you say, it's gorgeous, I see that you're out there. Does it make sense? Do you guys want to schedule this for tomorrow, or is this, I don't want to be, a distraction. I don't want to be in the way of this stuff. And I understand life happens. We can reschedule this for a couple of days, and they'll say, no, 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 let's do it. And you may find that in of itself gets both parties there. If that's the case, I think you need to be very cognizant of their time and get it done fast. Go through your presentation pretty quickly, but at least you'll have the attention of both of them at that point. Get them involved as well. Okay, both of them. A lot of times, Jen and I, when we go in and we train sales professionals and we're watching them give their presentation, it's sometimes you can get stuck in the habit of talking to only one or the other. And I'll tell you what, if you lose one, like, okay, so you start to give the presentation and he's asking a lot of questions, and so you find yourself talking mostly to him. If she stands up and leaves the room, you screwed up. You were not involving her. You weren't asking her questions. You weren't getting her. You weren't. I mean, why would she stick around there? You're obviously not involving her or talking to her, and so she gets up. You're going to have to get her back involved at that point. It's better to try and get them both involved right from the very beginning. Talk to both of them. Ask them both. They're going to have varying opinions. You can find out the way they talk to each other, the way they react to each other, how much discussion they want to have. I mean, you can just learn a lot about the way they talk to each other, and so definitely get them both involved, and don't be afraid to wait. I mean, it's like sometimes the kids are screaming, and the wife will get up and go in because she has to take care of the kids. I think they appreciate it when you wait for them. I can wait a minute to continue. And if she says, yeah, I'll be right back, that's awesome. If she says that, then you know that she's interested. If she says, no, just go on and talk to John, it's fine, then you probably need to do more to get her interested, You also get an idea of who's driving the decision at that point, because it's I mean, you can kind of get an indication of whether this is something that they're going to do together. You can kind of get an indication of which one is interested in putting the water treatment system in. Okay, this is one of the big things here is, do they see you as a professional? And this is a question to ask yourself all the way around. Okay, is, do they see you as a professional? So are they being disrespectful to you? Because it is. I mean, I talk a lot about being respectful to them, and I do think first and foremost we have to start there. Okay, this is their home, it's their time, so I think that you have to start by giving them respect. That's really critical. But I also think that if you find that people are treating you disrespectfully, like they're treating you like a sales guy, like the same way that they would treat, some people view sales people as almost, an unnecessary, or like a necessary evil, like you have to go through these salespeople in order to get this thing. So the question is, if you find a lot of people treating you that way, or if you find a lot of people that are not calling you back, or that are walking away, or doing other things, then one of the things to do is take a look and see if there's anything that you can do to represent yourself as a professional. At that point, they're seeing you as a salesperson, not as a sales professional. And so take a look in the mirror and see if there's more you can do to present yourself like a professional. Okay. Arguing spouses, if you run into this sometimes, and if you've been doing this, any in-home sales, you're walking into their domain. And, generally speaking, if you're doing sales where they're coming to you, they're not usually going to be fighting or arguing. But it does happen where you walk into a house and they are, you can just tell the tension is in the air, man. It's, you can just tell the way they're reacting to each other, and it's little jabs and stuff. In that situation, my only advice to you is run. Okay, I mean, slightly, you just need to either go get through it really fast. I mean, it happens, and the thing that sucks about it is they're going to make up later and probably going to be embarrassed about it. They're going to be embarrassed that that you saw them that way. I mean, you can go in there, you'll get an idea, you'll get a gauge, but when they're arguing with each other, this isn't a decision that's going to be made, and it has nothing to do with you. It's life, it happens. Anybody that's ever been married or lived with somebody or been involved with somebody has had disagreements. That's human nature. I don't care if they're the most compatible people in the world. There's people that have disagreements, and if you happen to walk into their lives at that moment, you're probably not going to make a sale, because you're going to make a sale when everybody's feeling warm and fuzzy. And at that point, they're not feeling warm and fuzzy. They want to get on with their, resolution of whatever they're disagreeing on. So I say exit as quickly as possible on that one. Call them back. I mean, it can happen. You can get the sale, but be respectful of them. Definitely don't take sides. Don't go in there and look. I don't want to be, maybe this isn't my place, but to be honest with you, that dress does make you look a little fat. I mean, maybe I'm out of line there, but yeah, he does kind of have a point. And yes, you are bald, and the goatee does not look good on you. No, it doesn't. So you should shave it. Yes, and clip your hairs and nose hairs while you're at it. Anyway, moving on. Messy basement. So this we do run into legitimately, and there's a couple things I want to talk to you about on this one, because first and foremost, I don't know why when people call us out to the home to have a water test done. Now, some of you don't have basements. Like we have clients down in Florida, and there are no basements down there, and you don't have to deal with this. But there are garages and kitchens and stuff like that. But keep in mind, they, I'm not sure why people don't realize that we have to do a plumbing assessment. Well, I guess maybe it's because there are some companies out there that don't bother to do a plumbing assessment. I mean, they just go in, test the water, and just assume they can do it. But I recommend all of you do a plumbing assessment. You got to take a look at where the water comes in. You got to look at where it's going to drain. You got to look at the outside lines. All the things that you do with the plumbing assessment. Okay, we need to take a look at all that stuff. All right, but a lot of times people, my basement, up until, I mean, about 6 months ago, it was getting pretty bad. Now it's all cleaned out now. Now it's picture perfect because I listed my house and it looks really good now. But even 6 or 8 months ago, I had so much crap in my basement, it just became the storage place. And even when I would have people over, we sometimes do some training at my house because I have a well and a softener and all that stuff. It was kind of embarrassing, to take people down in my basement. I didn't like people seeing that. My upstairs is clean. It's where, I'm kind of proud of it, but down there it was kind of embarrassing. So be empathetic about that too. Keep in mind, this is their house, okay? This is their living space. And some people, they can have a spotless upstairs and their basements can look, it can be where all the stuff gets shoved so that their basement, or so their upstairs looks good, but be empathetic about it, okay? They might be a little embarrassed about it. This is really important also. Just think about your installers. Don't send your installers in. I had one customer one time that had a dog that had been sick down in their basement, and there were piles of feces and urine all over the place in the basement. And it was just, I told the customers, they bought that night, but they had explained to me that their dog had been sick and they had put it down. And I'm like, well, I'm sure that they didn't even think about me having to go down in the basement to take a look and do the plumbing assessment. I mean, I'm sure that they were exceptionally embarrassed, but I also mentioned to them politely that the basement would have to be cleaned up before the installers came. I wasn't gonna send the installers into that situation. There's been times where I've had to go home, I've gone into a house, and I've had to go home and shower before I did anything else just because it was so nasty. So do think about your installers. Think about the people where you're going to be there. And again, they see you as a professional. If they see you as a professional, I mean, think about the doctor, right? When you go to the doctor is allowed to ask you questions that are very personal, very intimate questions that nobody else could ever ask you, and you wouldn't answer. So if they see you as a professional, then you have a right. You need to do that plumbing assessment and look in that basement. And, it's embarrassing for me to get certain types of exams when I go to the doctor. It's uncomfortable and embarrassing, but I realize that it's necessary. That's the doctor's job to do that. And so I accept it because I see my doctor as a professional. And that's the same way it may be with you, okay, is, there's certain things that you have to do as a professional, but they may be uncomfortable with it. So make sure that they understand that it's part of your job. Okay, and like I said, don't be afraid to mention it, because if you are a professional, then you can mention those things. All right, this happens sometimes. A customer will have an evening where they'll have scheduled 2 or 3 people to come out. This happened with just last week with one of the sales appointments that Mark and I ran. Now, we did not see the customer or the competitor leave, but it happened. She called and set the appointment, and she said that the other guy was coming right before us, and so we went. We waited our time. We had set a time, but told her, okay, give us a call if he's, if you want to give us a call, then we'll come. If he leaves earlier than what you expect, then we'll try and come earlier. But in general, don't be early. One of the very first appointments I ever ran was this way. I had I think it was a 5 or 6 o'clock appointment. I think maybe 6 o'clock. One of the very first ones I ever ran. And she told me, the customer told me, I only have an hour because I have somebody else coming at 7. And okay, so that means she's telling me I have an hour. That means I need to be done within an hour. Okay, that tells me how much time I have, so I need to budget my time. I need to be familiar enough with my presentation that I can do that presentation within an hour. Okay, but what happened was 6:30. Here comes the competitor knocking on the door. I've only been there for 30 minutes. I'm going through the presentation, and the competitor knocks on the door, so she has to get up and go answer. And he says, well, I saw the cars in the driveway, and I thought I'd stop and see if you guys could do it earlier. I can tell you, I got that sale, and it probably was not because I was very smooth or good at my sales presentation. I was brand new in sales. But I think one of the reasons I got it was because that guy was so disrespectful. And whether or not I was there or not, whether another sales appointment, another competitor was there or not, uh, if she sets it for 7 o'clock and you just show up, they could be right in the middle of dinner. They could. I mean, I don't think that's a good way to start a presentation. But definitely, if you know that there's going to be other competitors there, don't be early. Okay, don't be too early. You're going to throw it off. It's going to be uncomfortable for everybody, and frankly, it's rude to other people who are trying to do the same things. I mean, look, you can have competitors. I get it. That's happened to me before. I've been on a sales call, and when I had a company vehicle, and a competitor knocked on the door during the sales presentation and came in, and I could hear him at the front door. When you're done with him, and you really, give me a call, and I'll show you what a really good softener is like. Or they said something like that. There was a competitor. I cannot even believe how rude and disrespectful that is to both the customer and your competition. So don't be early if you know that there's a competitor there. Also, don't be late. If the customer sets has a 7 o'clock appointment for you, trust me, they may actually, if there's somebody in there that won't leave, who's refusing to leave, who they don't like, okay, you very well could be the reason. Give them the excuse they need to cut that one short. Don't assume that just because that salesperson refuses to leave on time, that the customer doesn't want them to leave. Okay. On the other hand, you can say, if you're respectful, and say, I can give you guys 10 or 15 minutes to finish up here if you want, if that makes it. And they may say, yeah, do you mind? We'll finish up, and then that you're going to start off, because most of your competition has spent time bashing you. Okay, the reason they're later or whatever is because they spent a lot of time bashing you and talking bad about you, especially if they knew you were coming in. Let them bash you, okay? Because you're not going to go in there and bash. Okay, you can feel free to text somebody. By the way, if just shoot, if you have their cell phone number and you've talked to them. I see that there's still somebody there. Do you want me? That's less obtrusive than a phone call, but it allows them to text you right back and say, do you mind? 20 minutes will be good, or whatever. So texting is I think it's completely appropriate in that situation. Sometimes if you have their cell phone number, especially if you've had an opportunity to talk to them on the phone. This is what happened with this appointment that we had last week. When we set the appointment with this customer, first off, the competitor that was going in before us gave them like an hour and a half time frame. They were going to be there somewhere between 3:30 and 5. So they didn't even know when they were going to arrive. And so I feel like we could have shot her a text or given her a call if it had gone later. So do you still need a little more time? Just want to let you know we're in the area. Let us know when you want us there, and we'll be there. I think they appreciate that. I think it's a lot more personal, and they appreciate it. Do not talk bad about your competition. Look, I mean, the reality is, on this webinar right now, we've got different companies who represent different products. But even if there's one of those people out there that are just, your products and your company and your service will speak for itself. Okay. Even if there's one that that's just slime balls, or they're too expensive, or that you're better than them. Let your products speak for themselves. Okay. You don't have to bash them. And this happens sometimes where they're walking out just as you're walking in. Uh, I see that's happened to me. It's happened lots of times where you exchange, you walk in and out at the same exact time, and they're leaving just as you're coming, or vice versa. And it's like they just have to puff up their chest and say something snarky, like, I don't know how they get the good one now, or what, just whatever. Be above that. You're a professional, okay? Don't don't go down to their level. It's frustrating, and occasionally you'll lose a sale to that person, but man, what comes around goes around. If they are that way in general, you're gonna beat them the vast majority of the time if you have done a good job. If you're representing a good product, a good company, you don't have to puff your chest out. And the customers don't appreciate that. They don't want to see that. Not most of them. I suppose you have some sadistic people out there who do that on purpose just to see how you're going to react or whatever. I don't play that game. Short timers, these are the ones that you walk in there and they're looking at their watch, or they say, I got to be somewhere in about a half hour. Well, I mean, that happens. It will happen sometimes. You can definitely ask, would it make sense to reschedule it? They'll go, no, why don't you just test the water and tell me what I need? Well, if that's the case, then you're not going to be able to do your long, thorough presentation. Okay, that's where you got to get right to the point. You say, okay, well, tell you what then. How long do we have? 30 minutes at most. Okay. Now, there's a couple reasons they may be saying this. It's possible that they have one of your competitors in, or even an experience with another salesperson, and that sales, we have all heard of or had experiences of salespeople that spent 3 hours in the house and wouldn't leave. There's I know of competition of other water treatment companies in my area right now that if you call them out, you're going to spend 3.5 hours on this set, thorough, and it's not even an engaging presentation. I mean, it's an impressive presentation, but it's like a scripted show that they have to do. Like this, they have to go through and do this entire show. Mark and I spent, we were at this house the other night for over 2 hours at that house, but it was very engaging, and a lot of it was just kind of, back and forth with the customers. We were talking to the customers. I asked Mark when we left, do you feel like we overstayed our welcome? And I think we both agreed that no. They were very engaged. They had questions. I think that they appreciated. Excuse me. Wow, that one snuck up on. Sorry about that. They appreciated the conversation. So it's possible that they're telling you that they only have a half hour because they want to make sure to nip that in the bud, that you're not there for 3 hours later. But if there are some who only have that half hour and they tell you that, then I think it's important to get right to the point. That's where you say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, let me test the water, and then I'm going to ask you some very direct questions because we carry a lot of different things, and I want to make sure that I'm giving you a recommendation on what is there. So do you have are you looking at both the water conditioner and the drinking water, or one or the other? What would you like me to focus on? Let them answer that question. Are you looking at a single tank softener or a twin tank softener? Okay, are you looking at price or quality? What's a bigger concern to you? Do you want me to talk to you about the less expensive system, or are you looking at something that's going to last you a long time and be way more efficient? Because we have both options. And then ask them, do you have a budget in mind you want to stay within? Because if I'm limited on time, I can't give you all the options. I've got to narrow it down to what your needs are very specifically. Get right to the point. I think they're going to appreciate that if you're very direct. Respect their time, okay? If they tell you you only have a half hour, plan it to where you have a half hour. Also be willing to reschedule. And again, if this is happening a lot to you, take a look in the mirror and see if you're giving them any reason to not see you as a professional. Other issues, this is a big one right now, okay? Religion and politics. It's almost impossible right now to go anywhere without politics being a big issue. It will probably be that way definitely for the next week, and probably for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll have about a 2-week respite before people start campaigning for the next presidential election. Definitely in the midterms. unbelievable how long all of that goes on. Just seems forever and ever and ever. But you cannot avoid the politics thing right now. The biggest thing, I don't think that religion and politics, I don't think that it's absolutely necessary always to stay away from these things. I mean, if somebody has a yard sign out in their front yard and they actually happen to feel the same way you do, I don't think there's anything wrong with building that rapport and talking to them and connecting with them on it. You know, if you do share the same way, the biggest thing that I want you to understand, or that I need to talk about as far as religion and politics, is that it's not your story. Okay, it's theirs. They should never, in my opinion, have any idea where you stand on religion or politics. They should not know how you're going to vote. I don't think there's anything wrong with discussing it. Okay, I don't think that there's anything wrong with letting them talk about it, especially if they're very passionate about it. I don't think there's anything, but it's not your story; it's theirs. Okay, it shouldn't have any impact at all. It shouldn't have any. It shouldn't change anything. They should, you know, they let them assume that you are. I mean, if you listen more than you talk, then they're going to have that connection with you and assume you're like-minded anyway. Okay, so, but it's not your story. It doesn't, whether you agree or don't agree. One thing I want to say about religion is you need to be very cognizant also. Be a detective when you walk in the house. If it's, you know, Christmas time and you walk in and there are no Christmas decorations anywhere, then wishing them Merry Christmas. I mean, you know, I don't want to get into the big debate about the, you know, the whole war on Christmas thing, blah, 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 wherever you stand on it. I'm just saying that if you are a professional and you know, if you go in there, I mean, there are a lot of religions that don't celebrate Christmas. Maybe they, you know, maybe they do celebrate Christmas, but they're secular about it. I mean, I don't know. You know, without you, there are certain things you just want to be aware of in the way you word things if you want to make that sale. I had a customer, you know, one time. This is a story in my book where, and seriously, they said, you know, we like to pray about everything before we make the decision. I hear that a lot. Well, let us pray on it. That's a common thing. You're going to hear that a lot. A lot of people like to pray. It's a big deal. You know, I mean, you're looking at a $6,000 investment for their home. It is a big deal. You know, that's not something that people want to make. And so if they feel that prayer helps them with that decision, then it makes sense that they would want to pray on it, reflect on it a little bit. But this one customer, they said, well, we don't make any decisions without praying on it first. I'm like, okay. You know, and so as I was about to ask them when, you know, do you want me to touch base with you the next day or two, they called the kids in and they put the agreement in the middle of the table right there in the kitchen, and they all held hands and asked if I wanted to pray with them. And I was like, sure. You know, so I sat at the kitchen table and I was holding hands with them, and they prayed over the contract, over whether or not they should buy this water softener and drinking water system from me. The kids weren't even involved in the presentation. They brought them out and they held hands, and after we were done, I mean, I'm sitting there going, I mean, my opinion personally is I don't think it matters to God whether you buy one particular brand of softener or drinking water system or not. But I understand that some people they put, you know, they give everything to God, and so you know, I would have gotten up probably and turned on the water or something to give some sort of a sign, but my hands were held, so I couldn't exactly do that. But anyway, we're done, and we're done with the prayer, and the husband goes around and says, "What do you think?" I really feel like this is something we should do, and the kids were like, "Yeah, I want to taste good water," and I was like, "Thank you." Like, I'm trying to figure out how I can get a reference letter from God, you know, because it seemed like a pretty solid endorsement to me. My point with that whole story is that it wasn't my story, it was their story. And, you know, I could have, you know, I'm not really comfortable with this, or this is not really but it's not my story. And it did no harm for me to, and in fact, quite the opposite. Not only did it not do harm, but what a compliment, you know, for them to involve me in this family tradition, to be part of that. I mean, what an honor to be part of that, you know, to be invited to be part of that and to be trusted enough to serve them like that. So anyway, judging, we've all had experiences here where we've gone into a situation like this, and we've seen cars out there, and we go, oh man, this is. I mean, another story in my book I talk about is the 28-year-old grandfather is a mobile home much like this one, and I went in, and the door had obviously been kicked in. 28-year-old grandfather. So this guy was 28. His daughter was 14 and about 8 months pregnant, and man, he was immediately denied on credit. They wanted the most expensive softener we carried, and he was denied on financing, but he actually went to the back and brought out a couple $1,000s in cash and paid in cash. And I'm like, oh, well, somebody's going to make their drug dealer upset, or whatever. Somebody's going to miss a payment somewhere. But it's not my story. But I also never in a million years ever would have thought that I was going to make that sale. But do your presentation. Do a presentation. Show respect. I mean, there's sometimes that you just know. I mean, I have gone out to homes where there have been holes in the floor, and where you just know, and that's when you can ask what they're looking for, but be very careful about prejudging, because you're going to be wrong sometimes. Decline financing. This happens. This is always scary. It's uncomfortable. Things are getting a little bit better now, that the economy has kind of picked up and more people are working. But I know, I mean, I don't mind telling you that, I mean, my credit is, 6-7 years ago was picture perfect. It was A+ perfect. But I've owned a business for 7 years and have owned that business through a recession. And I got to tell you, my credit is not as perfect as it once was. I mean, it's definitely coming back and it's better, but it got scary for a little while. And I mean, for me, as somebody that has kind of gone through that, I can be a little more empathetic. They're embarrassed about it. They want to try. They don't want to. They're just be empathetic. Okay, don't be. You gotta make sure that they understand that you understand. Okay, when you're talking to them about it. Moral Compass, we have a podcast that you can find. So on iTunes, I think it's still there on iTunes. You can find it on, all of you are members to Moti-Vitality.com. It's called Is That Cocaine on the Coffee Table? And that's named after that because I walked into a house one time and somebody was doing lines of coke. It was right there. They were cutting it up and right on the coffee table. And which my first thought was, well, they can afford it. That's good. There's money here. That's fine. But no, just, again, it's not your story. And I mean, I think that there's a line to be drawn. If you see kids being abused or animals being abused, I mean, I think I would have a hard time not reporting that. But the other stuff, I think that you are going to run into some situations that are different from what you run into. And I don't think it's your place to, it's not your story. Okay. Again, it's their story. You're a professional doing a job, and that's the way it needs to be. Okay. So that's it. Any questions or comments on this? We've got about 1 minute left, 1.5 minutes if we're going to stay here on time. Any thoughts? I'm going to unmute and see if anybody has any thoughts here. Oops, I just unmuted. Just you, Stacy. I unmuted you. Okay. Anybody have any thoughts or comments on this? Jen, you have anything to add?
I guess going back to the females, and the one-leggers and stuff like that, something to remember is that, the females, I've had a lot of people mention that, they don't speak to the wife, they only speak to the husband. You touched a little bit on that, but, that bothers women a lot. And then also, something to remember is that the females are not only taking care of their grown children, but taking care of their parents as far as decision making on in the home. Really focusing on
yeah.
Yeah, they say that. I mean, because women these days, they're taking care of children, you know, even adult children, and they're taking care of parents.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point. So they're definitely capable of making decisions. Okay, everybody, so this month, I forget the exact date, I'm sorry, I should have put it on here, but it's the week before Thanksgiving. On Wednesday, we're going to be doing the November member exclusive webinar, and we're going to talk about how to say thank you, and we're going to talk about, because Thanksgiving theme, right? So we're going to talk about how to say thank you to your teammates, to your coworkers, to your employees, but also your customers. Okay, so please watch for information on that. And
it's November 6th.
oops, that's November 16th, I think you were saying, Jen. I accidentally muted everybody. So November 16th, it looks like we're doing that, and that's going to be in a couple weeks. And so on Wednesday. So thank you, everybody. Have an awesome, awesome week and weekend, and we will talk to you next time, if not sooner. Okay, thanks, everybody.